All right, we need to talk about Michael Simoneau, the guy behind the whole Zeroth system. Because today, we're going to unpack one of the weirdest and most important stories in tech. It's a story about how a single dirty bowl in a sink became the secret key to understanding a whole new vision for the global economy. And it all boils down to one totally baffling question.
I mean, seriously, think about this. This is the central mystery, right? We're talking about a guy who designed a hyper-advanced 128-bit distributed web, a legitimate genius when it comes to systems. And yet, if you read his own journals, this same guy was often completely paralyzed, literally unable to do the most basic things to take care of himself. So how? How can those two people exist in the same body?
You look at the work and it's just staggering. Visionary ideas like the hash web, the Gemini token. I mean, it is dense, it is brilliant. But then you look at the man and you see someone sleeping till 3 p.m., obsessed with his coffee and completely, utterly shut down by a piece of dirty ceramic. It feels like these two things just can't be true at the same time.
But what if they're not two different people? What if one actually explains the other? Well, that's the core idea we're diving into today. We're going to see how his personal paralysis wasn't some weird quirk that existed alongside his genius. No, it actually created the physics for his entire system. The dish really does explain the dollar.
Okay, so to get our heads around his vision for money, we have to start with the dish. See, for Simoneau, his inability to do this simple chore wasn't laziness, it wasn't depression. In his mind, it was something far colder, far more logical. He diagnosed it as a sequence failure. Just look at this. For most of us, this is a to-do list, right? Some suggestions. For Simoneau, this is a block of code. It's absolute. Every single step has to execute in order. And if one step fails, say he doesn't take that walk, the whole chain just cascades into failure. If that dish isn't washed, he can't eat, period. The program just stops running.
So you have to understand, when he's staring at that dirty bowl, he isn't just seeing a chore he doesn't want to do. He's seeing a runtime error. His brain has hit a fatal bug in the code, a missing file, and the entire system, his ability to get food in his body, just crashes. And this is the fundamental difference, isn't it? A typical brain, well, it improvises. You just rinse the bowl out, grab a plate, use a coffee mug, whatever. The goal is to eat. But Simoneau's brain doesn't work like that. It doesn't improvise. It compiles. It has to follow the instructions exactly as they're written. It's like a house of cards. You pull out one card, and the whole thing comes down. You know, in engineering, there's a term for this. It's called a single point of failure. It's this one critical vulnerability that, if it breaks, the whole machine grinds to a halt. And for Simoneau, his entire nutritional well-being depended on one single solitary bowl. If that bowl was in the wrong state, if it was dirty, the system was down.
So what did he do? What was his brilliant solution? He didn't try to fix the bug in his brain. Nope, he fixed the architecture. He bought a second bowl. This is a classic engineering principle. It's called failover. If server A goes down, the system just automatically switches over to server B. If dish A is dirty, he just fails over to dish B. He literally hacked his own life using the logic of high availability servers.
Now this is where it all clicks into place. Because this wasn't just some quirky life hack. This core concept, the absolute desperate need to prevent a system from stalling, that became the key to understanding his entire economic theory, the human dollar.
I mean, think about it. We're all taught that money should be static. You save it, you accumulate it, you put it in a vault. Simoneau looked at that and said, that's not a feature, that's a bug. He completely reframed the problem with this incredibly powerful idea. He wasn't building money that just sits there and rots. He was building money that is forced to be alive.
His favorite analogy was biological. A muscle you don't use, it withers, it atrophies. The body reclaims those resources for something else. Simoneau sees hoarded money in exactly the same way, as dead tissue in the body of the economy. So his system is designed to force a kind of economic metabolism, the rule of simple, use it or lose it.
So how does this actually work? Well, it's pretty wild. If you just hold on to the human dollar, THD, and do nothing with it, its value automatically starts to decay. The only way you can keep its value is to spend it. And that transaction, that act of using it, that becomes the mining event which proves the money is alive and circulating. It's a built-in anti-hoarding protocol. Stagnation is mathematically impossible.
So what happens if you just let it sit there and rot away? This is the most elegant part. The token doesn't just crash to zero and become this useless zombie asset clogging up the system. No. If its value decays below the $1 floor, it simply completes. It's burned. It ceases to exist. In Simoneau's world, money is either alive and moving, or it's allowed to die.
And guess what? This same logic, this flow or die principle, it applies to the next layer up in his system, data. He's trying to solve the problem of digital decay, broken links, lost files, the internet's slow descent into error 404 Alzheimer's. The fundamental rule of his entire data architecture is so simple but so profound. Attention has value. On the web we use today, clicking a link costs you nothing. But in Simoneau's system, every single act of observation, of looking at data, is a tiny transaction. It creates a direct, unbreakable economic link between a piece of information and the attention we give it.
He does this with something called the 12/8-bit Gemini token. The easiest way to think about it is like a digital conjoined twin. The first 64 bits, that's the human dollar, the actual economic value. The other 64 bits are what he calls a zero pointer, or 0p, which is basically a permanent, unbreakable web link to the data itself. And here's the kicker. You can't separate them.
So what this means is every time someone looks at the data, they interact with its value token. That interaction reinforces it, kind of like resetting its life clock. It's proof that it's still relevant. But if the world forgets about it, if people stop looking, the value decays, the token completes, and the data is just pruned from the system, like a forgotten memory. So we've got the dish, the dollar, and the data, all running on the exact same physics. But the big question is, why? Why build all this? And that brings us to the final and frankly the most personal layer of this whole architecture, identity. Simoneau says this in one of his audio logs, and it's a pretty provocative statement. Some people might hear that and think it's naive, but you have to understand, within the cold logic of his system, this is a core architectural principle. He sees our physical bodies as little more than temporary containers for the thing that really matters, the mind. In his world, your identity is boiled down to a unique cryptographic key. It's a combination of your biohash, something you physically are, like a fingerprint, and your mind hash, something only you know, like a super complex password. Now, this key is mathematically unique to you, but, and this is the most important part, it contains zero metadata about your race, your gender, or what you look like. And that right there, that's the whole point. He built a system that is physically incapable of being biased because it doesn't even process the variables you need for discrimination. Simoneau, this man who felt so trapped and paralyzed by our messy, chaotic analog world, he was building a new one from scratch, with clean rules, a world where his mind could finally run without hitting a single error. Which leaves us with one last question to chew on. Is this whole thing a revolutionary blueprint for the future of money, data, and identity? Or is this entire brilliant, world-changing system just the most sophisticated backup dish protocol ever designed, all built by one man desperately trying to create a world where he could finally, simply eat his breakfast?